Welcome to our training video on Southwest Minnesota Arts Council's Grants for Artists for fiscal year 2025, which runs from July 1st, 2024 through June 30th, 2025.
I'm Carolyn Koska, the Grants Administrator for Southwest Minnesota Arts Council. During this training, you'll learn about Southwest Minnesota Arts Council, the guidelines for this grant program, the resources that are available for you on our website, how to use our online grant system, the application questions you'll need to answer, and the grant process, or what happens after you submit your application. Check out the chapters below if you want to go directly to a particular topic. For now, we'll start out talking briefly about Southwest Minnesota Arts Council.
Southwest Minnesota Arts Council, or SMAC, is a nonprofit organization committed to promoting and encouraging the development of the arts in the 18 counties of Southwest Minnesota by serving as a source of funds and technical services which enable local organizations, educational institutions, and individuals to sponsor, create, and promote the arts in their communities. Here is our region down in the southwest corner of the state. We are one of 11 regional arts councils that cover the whole state of Minnesota, working to get state arts funding out into all corners. So most of our funding does come from the state of Minnesota, with an allocation from the state general fund, but the majority from the Arts and Cultural Heritage or Legacy Fund. We also receive funding from the McKnight Foundation, which we use for our artist grants, and from memberships and donations from around our region. To be more specific about our region, applicants need to live in one of the following counties: Big Stone, Chippewa, Cottonwood, Jackson, Candy, Ojai, Lac-Qui-Parle, Lincoln, Lyon, McLeod, Meeker, Murray, Nobles, Pipestone, Redwood, Renville, Rock, Swift, or Yellow Medicine, or in one of two tribal nations, Pejutazizi, Upper Sioux Community, or Chanchayapi, Lower Sioux Community. We acknowledge that the SMAC region occupies the traditional, ancestral, and contemporary lands of the Dakota people. We have 3 grant programs that are open to artists who are at any stage of their careers. We have the Artist Growth Program, the Artist Equity Program, which is basically the same as Artist Growth, but specifically for artists who are Black, Indigenous, or people of color. We also have the Quick Support for Artists grant, which is a smaller grant that is available with a monthly deadline. And then we have one program that is specifically for those who are further along in their careers. This is the Established Artist Grant, which was previously Advanced Artist Fellowship. We award 2 of these per year, and we're looking for artists to demonstrate creative excellence, a substantial body of work, and show significant recognition of their work. For all of these grant programs, applicants need to live in our region for at least 6 months before applying. They need to continue living in the region throughout their grant contract period. Applicants also need to be at least 18 years old by the time they would sign a grant contract, and any arts discipline is eligible. All of these programs have the same eligible activities that you could apply for, and they might fall into some of these different categories, such as if you're focusing on creating new work, you could apply for things like supplies or equipment necessary for that. Maybe you need to rent some space, do some research. You can also request funding for your time to work on this work, or daycare costs if those are necessary for you. Your project might be focused around sharing your work, and depending on your art form, this might include things like framing, recording, getting your work edited, putting together a portfolio, updating a website, or creating a new one. You also might focus on artistic or professional development, so you could do things like take a class or a workshop, do some sort of one-on-one study with a mentor, or attend a professional conference. And finally, just for our Quick Support Grant program, there's one more project type that you could have, which would be a small community project where you're doing something which would both give you some growth as an artist and provide opportunities to the community as well. As far as amounts for these grants, the Quick Support for Artists grant is available for up to $1,000. The Artist Growth and Artist Equity grants are available for up to $4,000 each, and the Established Artist grant is available for up to $7,000. Some things related to eligibility, and these are all things that are not eligible for these grants. Projects that don't have an art focus, activities of something for profit or a business, equipment requests that are not specifically for the project that you're going to be working on. Also ineligible are credits or materials toward fulfilling degree requirements for students. College students are eligible to apply, but their project would need to be completely separate from what they are doing for their degree. Also ineligible are projects that are about developing curriculum plans or teaching materials. In other words, all of these grants are focusing on you personally and your artistic development, not you as an arts teacher. Also ineligible are requests for new building construction or purchase of real estate, activities for the religious socialization of the participants or audience, activities that attempt to influence any state or federal legislation, payments of debts incurred before the grant begins. In other words, you can't purchase something or owe something and then request a grant to cover that. If you've previously gotten another grant from us, you can't apply again until you have finished your project and completed your report on that. And also ineligible are applicants who have a past due final report with us still outstanding. One thing that is eligible is out-of-state travel and activities. We have in the last couple of years been able to move some money around in order to allow that in all of our artist programs. Now we'll look at some deadline dates. For the Quick Support program, the deadlines are the first of the month, August 2024 through May 2025. And the earliest date that you could start your project would be the first day of the following month. For example, if you applied by August 1st, you would hear whether you got the grant and be able to start your project by September 1st. And for all of our grants, you need to submit your application by 4 p.m. on the date of the deadline. The system will not allow you to submit after that time. And note that this is a change from previous years when the deadline was 4:30 p.m. For Artist Growth, if you are familiar with this program, you'll see that the deadlines are quite a bit later in the year than they have been previously. We've had a change in when we receive our funding from the McKnight Foundation, so we've needed to hold off on those deadlines a little bit. So round 1 deadline is October 16th for projects starting December 1st or later, and round 2, April 16th for projects starting June 1st or later. Artist equity dates are similar to last year. Round 1 deadline is September 18th for projects starting November 1st, and round 2 deadline is February 26th for projects starting April 1st or later. Established Artists is another one that has been shifted due to our McKnight funding, so that deadline is now January 15th for projects starting March 1st or later. And again, remember to submit applications by 4 p.m. on the deadline date. For your project, you'll need to choose a start date, and it's important to first check for those earliest allowed dates for the round that you're applying for. You can't start any activities toward your project before that start date that you choose. So you could not purchase anything, book any travel, etc. before that start date. You cannot spend any money before that date. If there is something that you absolutely would need to spend money on, for instance, if you had to put a deposit toward your registration for an event and that had to happen before the start date, you could not include that amount in your project budget. You'll also need a project end date, and in choosing that, make sure you have enough time to complete the tasks that were involved in your project, but also if you need to get any feedback from other people as part of your goals for the project, make sure to include time for that afterwards as well. All projects that are awarded this year, fiscal year 25, need to be finished up by June 30th of 2026, which gives you a fair amount of time to complete your projects. And now we'll head over to our website and look at what resources are available for you there. So here we are on our website. Everything that you need will be under this grants tab, including login to the grant system. But we have information available for each of our grant programs. So we're going to go look at our individual artist programs. And all of them are listed here, but we'll go to our artist growth grants. And the first thing you see will be the grant guidelines. And it's important to read through these. We did talk about some eligibility things, but we want to make sure that you haven't missed anything. So please make sure to read through all of the guidelines for the grant that you are applying for. We also have the Apply Now button, which takes you again to the grant system. Then we have some important dates that you'll need to know for each of the rounds. We have application deadlines, timeline for the review process, and your earliest project start date. We have a tutorial video available. You'll see that this one is from last year, but our new video that is being recorded as we speak will be posted shortly. You also can go look at what live workshops are available during the year. And then at the bottom of the page, we've got some links to some materials, the guidelines again. You can look at the application questions. We have them here in a Word document. Some people like to work in that first and then paste their answers into the system later. Scoring criteria, you can even take a look at the final report questions if you want to get an idea of what you are getting yourself into. A couple other pages I'd like to show you under Grants Help. We have the Workshops and Assistance page. Our Workshops and Assistance page outlines all of the ways that you can get help with your application. We have grant support open office hours. On the second Tuesday of each month, you can stop by our office in Marshall from 10 a.m. to 2 p.m. While you're there, you can talk through project ideas, sit and work on your application with staff there to answer any questions. Maybe you need some help preparing your work samples or working on a final report, but you can just stop in and get the help that you need. We also have some grants Q&A sessions. There are a series of those in person, so look to see if we are coming somewhere near you, and these will be updated as we have specific dates scheduled. We also have virtual sessions available. You can register for those here. And for both of these, you can learn a little bit about all of the grant programs that are available and then have time to ask questions about your specific project and get those answered. This year we also have a couple of workshops on some specific grant writing topics. First on reaching underserved and underrepresented communities, and then on grant goals and evaluation, so you can check those out. You can easily schedule some time to meet with me. You can just click this link and choose a time on my calendar, and we can meet by phone, by Zoom, or in person at our office in Marshall. And then here are videos of our past workshops that we've had as we are recording our videos for our fiscal year 25 grants. Those will also appear here. There's one more page with resources for you. And that is our credits and resources page. So we've got links to grant credit lines and logos that you may need to be using for your marketing. Then we've got a sample contract so you can see what that looks like ahead of time. If your organization is using a fiscal sponsor, there's a sample agreement available here. If you're doing a project where you need a cooperative agreement with your facility owner, there's a sample agreement here for that. And then we've also got some accessibility resources here for you. And now we'll head over to our grant system. That brings us to our login page. You can enter your email address and password here if you already have an account in the system. If you are totally new, you can click Create New Account. If you're not sure whether you or someone from your organization already has an account in the system, you can contact us and we can get that figured out for you. But for right now, we are going to log in. And as we first come into the system, a reminder, if you have also worked as a grant reviewer or panelist, for us to remember to switch your role to applicant. And here we are on our applicant dashboard. So this is where you will come when you log in to the grant system. Unless you are coming in for the first time, then you will be brought straight to this apply page. On the apply page, you'll find all of the grants that are currently available, and we'll scroll through and look for one of our artist grants. We'll look at the Artist Growth Program. All of the applications are pretty similar for artists. But from this page, if you want to just take a look at the application without actually starting anything, you can hit the preview button. But we are going to go ahead and click apply. A couple buttons to point out at the top before we get into the application. We have Google Translate embedded into the site, so if you need to work in another language, you can select that here, and it will translate the interface and all of the questions for you, and you can work in that language. We also have the Copy Previous Answers button. If you have done an application in the system before, it will bring up those past applications and you can choose one to copy answers from. It will copy over answers to any questions that are the same between the two applications. Then we have the Collaborate button, and this allows you to invite someone to work on the application with you. You would just put in their email address here and what level of permission you want to give them, and write them a little message saying what it is that you'd like them to do. If you'd like them to just proof things for you, or there are some attachments that they can add for you. So you would just invite them, they'll receive an email and just need to create a password to come in and work on your application with you. You'll need a name for your project. This does not need to be anything fancy, just something describing what it is that you are planning to do. You'll fill in the amount that you are requesting, though you'll probably want to wait to do your budget before filling that amount in. If you choose, you can share your pronouns with us so that reviewers can make sure they're referring to you correctly. We ask that you verify your contact information. If your account is connected to another organization or a school, for instance, we ask that you provide your personal contact information if that is different than what was listed above here. We have links to some of those important documents again, and some tips as you're working on your application. We do point out that the character limit for a lot of the fields is very large, and please don't feel like you need to fill that up if you have already felt like you've answered the question in full. So you'll start out describing your project. What activities are going to take place? If you'll be producing new work, give us some ideas of what and how much you're hoping to produce during the grant period, and also what your artistic vision is for that work. For instance, do you have a particular aesthetic that you're going for, something that you're trying to say with that work? If your project is more about a study opportunity, a workshop, a conference that you're attending, please describe that opportunity and teacher's qualifications if applicable. And then finally, we ask you to outline your timeline for the project. This next question is optional, just gives you some space if there's some additional information you want to provide. If you are doing a study opportunity, you could provide information about that here. If you're working with a particular teacher or mentor, you could put some information about them here, a resume or some samples of their work. If you are buying some equipment or supplies and want to provide the specs for those pieces of equipment, you could put that here. Or if you are working in some sort of medium or technique that might be less familiar to people and you want to provide some more information about that, you could put that here. So those are just some options of what could go in this field, and it's fine if you don't have anything that you want to put here. But you've got a couple places to upload things and include some links and then describe what those are. Next, you'll enter in your project start and end date, and it reminds you of the earliest and latest that those can be. Next is your budget, and you will just enter in your various budget items here, and then can enter in some amounts. And as we go to the bottom, you'll see that it is adding up for you. You'll be able to provide some more information about some of your budget items here in the budget narrative. If there are some more details you'd like to explain, we also ask if your project costs more than the amount that you can request, how you are planning to pay for those remaining costs. Next, we're looking at your experience, and you have two options here. You can either attach an artist resume if you have one, or if you don't have an artist resume, you can just tell us about your experience with your art form. How long have you been practicing it? What training have you had? Have you been sharing your work in any way? Are there any accomplishments that you'd like to tell us about? So either attaching the artist resume if you have one, or telling us about your experience with the art form. This next question is optional, but if you do work in folk or traditional art, we ask you to explain your connection to the cultural community that your art form comes from. What recognition do you or your work have from that community? If you have an artist website, you can put that here. And then we ask for some samples of your work. And depending on your art form, those could be written materials, images, audio, or video. And we have some links if you're needing to resize some images, combine some files. That'll walk you through how to do that if you need help with that. Something new this year, because not everyone who will be reading your application may have access to social media, we ask that you not provide social media links as your only work samples. If you do decide to include social media links, make sure that your profile is public, but be aware that not everyone will be able to see what you include. And if those social media links do end up being your only work samples, we ask you to include screenshots from those links in one of the upload fields so that people can at least see what that was. So you've got quite a few upload fields. You would describe in the box above what you're attaching and then upload that file. And then we've also got some link fields here. And again, here's where you can describe what it is you are linking to. Next, we're looking at how this project will contribute to your growth as an artist. So we're having you think about some goals. What artistic needs is this going to meet for you? How will this contribute to your growth as an artist? Are there specific changes that you're hoping for? Maybe they're changes to your skills, your knowledge, your attitude, your behaviors. And then how might you measure or prove that the changes you're hoping for have taken place? And we have some examples that you might get feedback from instructors or from peers. You might do a more formal comparison of your new work to your older work. Maybe you're using a journal to track some progress throughout the project. There are different ways of evaluating how this project has been going for you. Next is just some data that we need to collect, and this doesn't have any bearing on your application. Just some demographics. And then we look at some audience numbers, including yourself, how many adult artists are going to be involved in this project. If you're sharing your work, what do you expect for audience numbers? And it lets you know you can enter 0 if sharing your work is not part of this particular project. We ask you to let us know which options for assistance you might have taken advantage of during your grant writing process. And then we're just looking for signature to finish off the application. One thing that we have added for the moment is a feedback section. We're participating in a statewide survey with the other regional arts councils about how our application process is working. So if you wouldn't mind answering a few quick questions about how that has gone for you. Again, this does not have any bearing on your application. The reviewers will not see these answers. Then at the bottom here, you have your submit application button for when you're ready. You also have the save application button. As you're working, the system will be auto-saving for you, but if you click the save application button, it will give you a list of the required questions that you still need to answer, so that will help you track your progress. And if you'd like to continue working, you can just hit this continue button, but we're going to go back to our dashboard. And you'll see now here is this application that we just started. And if you want to continue working on it, you can just click the edit application link. And this is the same place you would come back to if you are awarded a grant, and it would have your contract and your final report. And now we'll head back to our slides. Now we have some tips for you as you're working on your application. First, make sure to think ahead to choose the best timing for your application. So check out the deadlines and start dates and see what makes the most sense for the timing of your project. Then read the guidelines and criteria carefully. As we mentioned before, we went through most things, but there are probably a few things that are in that written guidelines that we may not have covered. So make sure to take a look at that so that you're not surprised by anything. It's also good to start working on your application early. If you are needing to gather information from other people, if you might have some questions you need time to get answered, just make sure to give yourself plenty of time. Also in the application, you have noticed that a lot of the questions had multiple parts to them, so make sure you are addressing all of those and really answering those fully, that you're not missing any of those pieces. Also, as you're writing, you'll want to keep your answers real clear and concise. As we mentioned before, no need to try and fill up the text boxes if you feel like you fully answered the question. And also no need for any fancy grant language you might think you need. Just using everyday language is fine, as if you're telling a friend about the project. Another suggestion is to not assume that grant reviewers know anything about you or your project. We have reviewers coming from all around the region, so they may not have heard of your organization or be familiar with you as an artist. So be careful about including acronyms without spelling those out, talking about certain programs without explaining. Just assume as you're writing that the person reading doesn't know anything about what you're doing. And finally, we are here to help, so don't hesitate to contact us with any questions. There are multiple ways to get assistance with your application. You can certainly contact us to talk through your project before you're getting started. Make sure you're under the right grant program. Make sure elements of your project are eligible. You can also get answers to questions about the application as you're working on your project. And finally, we can do a review of your application draft before you submit it. If you let us know up to about 2 weeks before the deadline, we can guarantee that we're able to look through your application, give you some feedback, let you know if you're missing anything, if anything might sound confusing to the reviewers. This does not guarantee funding of your project, but we are able to give you some feedback. So another great reason to start working on your application early in order to have time for that part of the process. So what happens after you submit your application? The first thing is that SMOC staff will review it for eligibility and completeness. And if at that stage we find that something is missing or there's an eligibility concern, you'll have 48 hours to fix whatever that is. And then at that point, the group of applications from the round will go on to a panel of individuals from around our region who will discuss and score the applications based on the criteria for the program, which we'll look at in a minute. And then finally, their recommendations go to our board of directors who make the final funding decisions. And that most often just involves taking the applications in ranked order of score and taking the funding down the list as far as the budget goes. Now we'll look at the scoring criteria for each of these programs. For quick support, the reviewers will be looking at the impact of your project, worth 62% of your score, and then your ability to accomplish the project, worth 38% of your score. In more detail, for impact, they'll be looking to see that the project meets your artistic needs and is important to your artistic or professional development. They'll look to see if you have identified changes that might take place as a result of the project and plans to measure whether that has happened. And then if you are doing a community project type, they'll also look to see if the community is able to develop knowledge, skills, or understanding of the arts through your project. For ability to accomplish the project, they will look to see if your artistic ability and experience is a good fit for the project, if your timeline and budget are feasible, and then again, if you have that community project type, if you have an appropriate marketing plan. For both the artist growth and artist equity scoring criteria, the reviewers will be looking at the excellence of your work, worth 45% of your score, the project's contribution to your artistic growth, worth 45% of the score, and the feasibility of the project, worth 10% of the score. Again, more details on that. For excellence of work, they'll be looking to see that your training and accomplishments are at an appropriate level for the project. They'll look at your work samples to see if they show artistic quality and promise in the discipline for the project. And then they'll also look to see if you have articulated an artistic vision for your project. For growth, they'll look to see if the project meets your artistic needs and is important to your artistic or professional development. Again, looking for identification of proposed changes as a result of the project and plans to measure whether that has happened. And then for feasibility, they'll look to see if your activities and timeline are achievable and if your budget is clearly itemized and appropriate for your project. Then for established artist grants, they'll be looking at the excellence of your work, worth 58% of your score, the project's contribution to your artistic growth, worth 32% of the score, and feasibility of the project, worth 10% of your score. For excellence of work in more detail, they'll be looking to see if your resume and narrative show an advanced career stage, a substantial body of work, and significant recognition of your work. They'll look to see if your work samples show a very high degree of artistic quality and to see that you have a well-defined artistic vision for your project. Similar to the other grants for growth, again, does the project meet your artistic needs and is it important to your artistic or professional development? Have you identified changes that might take place as a result of the project for yourself? And do you have plans to evaluate or measure whether those changes have taken place? Then for feasibility, same again, if your activities and timeline are achievable and if your budget is clearly itemized and appropriate for the project. In the criteria where we've been talking about artistic quality, here are some of the things that the reviewers are directed to look for. They're looking for authenticity or originality in your work, technical skill, a personal artistic vision or voice, professional commitment, and work that brings forth some sort of response of emotion or intellectual inquiry. If you are working in folk, traditional, or cultural art, they will be looking at your work for authenticity, technical skill, your commitment to the art form, and recognition from the community that the art form developed out of. After the reviewers have done their scoring, applicants can also be awarded one additional percentage point for each of the following criteria that they meet related to SMOC's funding priorities. So if you are a first-time applicant to SMOC, if you are from the BIPOC or LGBTQ communities or a person with disabilities, or if you are from a county that hasn't received as much funding from us recently. So you would have the opportunity to have up to 3 additional percentage points added to your score. If your grant is awarded, you'll need to complete a contract, and we saw where those would be located in the grant system a little bit ago. And then payment of your full grant award will be sent to you after the contract is received, and you'll have an option to receive that electronically or by check. You'll need to acknowledge your grant on any publicity or marketing materials that you have. You'll need to include the credit line that can be found in your grant contract. And you might also need to include this Minnesota Legacy logo depending on the source of your funds. But all of these credit materials and logo files, etc., will be sent to you, so you won't have to worry about which options you need to include. And we also looked at the credits and materials page on our website where some of that information is available also. We understand that things happen as you're working on your project. So if it's looking like you may need to make some changes to your original plan while your project is in progress, contact us and we may be able to help with things like extending your project end date, approving some changes to your budget. So no worries if things change, but just make sure to contact us and get those changes approved. You'll be receiving a reminder partway through your project, checking in to see if anything has changed and what kind of changes might require a project change request to SMOC. You'll have a final report due 60 days after the project end date that you have chosen. So once you start your project, it's a good idea to go into that report and check what information you'll need to be gathering. There are some audience demographics questions, for instance. So make sure to look ahead what kind of information you'll need to be gathering during your project. And that's the last of the information that I need to share with you today.
Thanks for joining us for this grant training. Don't forget to take advantage of the options for assistance as you work on your application. Feel free to contact us with any questions you may have. Good luck!